Dr. Varvinskiy is a consultant anesthesiologist at Torbay Hospital in Devon, UK. He's an examiner for both the Royal College of Anaesthetists since 2010 and European Society of Anesthesiology and Intensive Care.
Having me. That's a pleasure to talk to the audience in India, and as a chairman of as the past chairman of the examination committee of the EDAIC. According to the regulations of the European Society, physiology book, Power and Cam, for example, physiology for anaesthetists, will give a good basis for physiology. So the physics basically concentrates on kind of enough. In the interest of time, usually examiners use this phrase. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on to another question.
Which means they're doing good.
That means they're doing well.
Is doing good.
Exactly. Oh. Stopping you is good, which means.
Hello all, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Dr. Dheeraj Masapu, and today we have a distinguished guest with us, and I will give a brief introduction about him in my channel. And he is Dr. Varvinskiy. Welcome to the channel, Dr. Varvinskiy. So Dr. Varvinskiy is a consultant anesthesiologist at Torbay Hospital in Devon, UK. He's an examiner for both the Royal College of Anaesthetists since 2010 and European Society of Anesthesiology and Intensive Care since 2006. And he's been a chairman of the committee as well. And he specializes in airway management and regional anesthesia, ophthalmic anesthesia, and education. And after finishing his postgraduate training in UK, he's been appointed in 2001 as a consultant anesthesiologist in Torbay Hospital. He's a UK Resuscitation Council certified BLS member, an ALS instructor, and a course director. And he has also translated chapters in Miller's anesthesia into Russian language. So, and also he's been, in charge of paper 1 part B of EDAIC. Welcome to the channel, Dr. Varvinskiy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. That's a pleasure to talk to the audience in India, and as a chairman of as the past chairman of the examination committee of the EDAIC, I know that there is a massive interest in taking European diploma anesthesia and care in India, and I have personally communicated to several organizers of the centers in Calcutta and in New Delhi and a few other centers. And I think you are probably, as a country, probably one of the biggest in numbers in terms of how many people take this exam.
Thank you very much. So this interview is going to help many students who are preparing for EDAIC examination. So first I'll put you through some questions which I prepared. So first I would like to ask about the part 1 examination. So in part 1 examination, paper A and paper B are there. So in that, when someone is preparing, so how should he start the preparation, and what should he keep in his mind when he's preparing, and how should he train himself from first year of post-graduation when he starts preparing?
Okay. So first of all, according to the regulations of the European Society, any doctor with a medical degree, not even in anesthetic training, can theoretically take this part 1 exam. So you don't have to be in the training position to attempt part. But obviously, it doesn't make sense, isn't it, to that if you're not actually training in anesthesia and intensive care. So we usually say that do not attempt to take this exam within the first year of your training. Do at least a couple of years of training, so you gain some practical experience, and then you will have an idea. Because otherwise, if you start theoretically reading stuff, then it will be very, very difficult. So do a couple of years of training as a minimum. We recommend 3 years of training before you start attacking any European kind of exams. And then little by little start reading of what you do every day and things like that. And then there are a lot of resources that you can use for preparation of the exam. And the UK originally produced enormous amount of books for preparation for FRCA, in both MCQs, and now we switched at the college to SBA, single best answers, and there are enormous amount of books. However, when it comes to the European exam, we stayed with the multiple true-false questions. So they are true-false questions. And then we'll come to the book, because to date there wasn't a dedicated book for this exam, which is exactly what we have just done. But a good solid sort of book like a physiology book, Power and Cam, for example, Physiology for Anesthetist, will give a good basis for physiology. And then pharmacology, I would strongly recommend somebody like Peck and Hill, Pharmacology, Anesthesia and Intensive Care. And as you probably know already, Sue Hill is one of my co-authors of my book. So, I've collaborated with Sue. So she contributed enormously to some sections of this book from her vast experience. So I would concentrate on basic sciences on 3 topics. So physiology, Power and Cam, pharmacology, Peck and Hill, and then physics. And with physics, there are many books in physics, and the beauty of physics is hard science. So once you've learned it, it's only a limited amount of knowledge that you have to retain to pass it, and you don't have to remember it for the rest of your life, really. Measurement, obviously, you will come across again and again and again, but the hard physics, hard science, and it's not at the very high level. We're not physicists. So there are Pabrook, Kenny and Davies. There's other very good books which were written in the past. And the others. And in my book, in the relevant sections, I do recommend those literature in the relevant chapters. So if you buy the book, then you will see that as well. Also, other resources are on the EDAIC website, and there is a whole document that I have prepared myself when I was a chairman called How to Prepare for the EDAIC. And there you have all the strategy, all the reading, the recommended reading list. Don't attempt to buy all the books from that recommended books, but I strongly suggest that you obtain our book in any shape or form, whether it's in paper format or in the Kindle format, which is already available. But at the end of the month, the book will also be available online, so you don't have to have a Kindle device to read it or buy the physical copy of the book. It will be online as well. So there is lots of. Also, the ESA runs something called ESA Academy, and in ESA Academy there are lots and lots of resources that you can watch, and there's also a video there with me, Sue, and Mario, or the authors of this book, where we actually explain in details everything about the exam, about paper A, basic sciences, about paper B, clinical sciences, and then we speak about the part 2, the oral questions. We call them now SOE, structured oral examinations. So resources are plentiful for you to obtain and to tackle. So go on the ESA website, read all that. Go to the book and just little by little. Okay, sorry, I need to stop talking, otherwise you'll...
No, nothing like that. You have to keep talking. I want you to... So basically, I didn't actually, introduce about your book till now. So Dr. Varvinskyy's book is recently published. So I'm telling all my audience, the link is there in the description. So in that book is covered about the part 1 and part 2. And about the OSCE session, that is SOE session also has been covered. So tell me more about the book now. Directly somebody should start reading the book, or first they have to read all the books that you told, and then we should go to the book of yours. How do you suggest?
Well, basically there are several tactics. I'll tell you my tactic. When I was preparing for 3 exams many years ago at the same time, I was sitting USMLE. I was sitting the FRCA, and then I was sitting the EDAIC. And the knowledge is similar, so I thought I'll prepare for all of them in the past. But what I did is actually I took MCQ books and there is a series of books still available called Hammond and Mackinder, where you could choose particular section of physics, for example, or physiology or pharmacology, and you don't have to do the whole paper. Similar with our book, there is a section there on pharmacology, section on physiology. So I would do, say, 20 or 10 in the evening, for example, MCQs on physiology, and then I will assess myself because the answers are there in the book, see my pass score, and then it will reveal which are your weaker points. And then you go to the book and you read about that topic, okay? Because you just had a feeling that you know nothing or you know very little, and then you attack that particular topic, and your attention is different compared to if you read in theoretical knowledge before, and then you attack in the MCQs, to compare to a little bit of humiliation of how little you know about the subject. And then your attention is focused, and then you read avidly, and then you read with more attention to that topic. And then you go back to those questions, and then you, when they answer them
like
again.
Reverse engineering, actually. So you
Correct.
and then reverse engineer, and then.
Correct. And then you go back, answer the question, and that gives you the positive feeling that what you've just read, you've learned, and then you answered the question successfully. And the important thing is to go back to that again, because you only retain so much knowledge for a long time. And you think you've done that, but the important thing is to revisit it again at some point later on. But don't rush into it, and give yourself, for part one, we usually say you need at least 6 months of a solid preparation, of solid reading. And it really depends, because although we went to medical school, but some parts of science, hard science, we liked, some we didn't like, somehow we passed and we got the diploma. But there will be inevitably gaps in our knowledge. Some people like anatomy, some didn't. Some like physiology, some didn't. And most of us didn't like physics and measurements, and that's hard part. But luckily, it's not a lot of it there in the exam. So it's only really a very basics of physics. But I urge you, because of physics and because of pharmacology, measurements, you can fail. And also there are 2 questions on statistics. Again, it's not hard statistics, it's very basic statistics, but still you need to know a little bit of that, because obviously later on in life you will be analyzing papers, you will be looking at research, and you need to understand the basic of the research. Okay. Yeah, so that's how I.
So before making these questions, I actually interviewed some of Indian students. What their weaker areas are? Most of them told physics is their weaker area.
Yes, right.
So how do you suggest? How should they go about the physics part in a simple way?
About the physics part. So the physics basically concentrates on kind of 2 sections. It's something called basic physics, about physics laws, okay? And then there is clinical measurements. And in basic physics, the hard part there is to relate the physics laws, like Boyle's law or other types laws, diffusion law, to anesthesia. And once you related that then becomes easier. Why do I need to know Boyle's law? So I can calculate the content of the cylinder, remains of the oxygen in the cylinder. That's for application of the Boyle's law, isn't it? So once you've made that link, why is it important? Then it becomes easier. There aren't many formulas to learn, and one of them is, for example, the formula about the flow, the Huygens-Cosel's formula. And that formula will be definitely asked in some part of the exam, because we deal with the flows all the time. There are just few graphs on temperature measurements and things like that. But behind every measurement, capnography or pulse oximetry or temperature measurement or neuromuscular measurement, there is some hard physics, okay, where you will be asked, tell me how the pulse oximeter works. And then you will say, okay, pulse oximeter works, you apply the probe, it shines the light, blah, blah, blah. And then you say, Beer's-Lambert law. Okay, that's a little bit of hard physics, and you have to explain what's the part of the Beer's law and what's the part of the Lambert's law. Okay, and that's basically it. But then, if you didn't know that, then the examiner will think, okay, he knows the facts, but he cannot explain why. Okay? And that is important, because if you cannot explain why, you will score borderline for that question. Okay. And if you score, which means 1 point, okay, you won't fail that question, but you'll score borderline. And if you score too many borderlines, that is -1, -1, -1, -1, and then eventually you will not pass. So yeah, so hard knowledge. Sorry, go.
No, please continue. Continue.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what physics is about. But as I said, luckily, unlike, for example, pharmacology, which changes all the time, isn't it? New drugs appear. We need to know about their mode of action and so on. Physics is fairly limited. And once you've understood that, I'm afraid learning physics is hard. You need to go back and back and back and back to it. And then you will learn it eventually. Because with pharmacology, we deal with it all the time. You can relate to clinical practice. And that's why I said, do 2-3 years of anesthesia before you start taking the exam. Otherwise, it's very difficult, very theoretical.
So that is why you made the suggestion, I think, in the EDAIC website. The 3 years is required for part 1 and 5 years for part 2.
Correct. That is the recommended duration of training before you start attacking the exam. And also remember, you can take part 1 at any point of your training.
Yeah.
It's recommended that it's 3 years, but part 2 you can only take at the last year of your training program, or after you qualified as the anesthetist in your country. Okay. Yes. Which makes it essentially a postgraduate exam. So for part 2, we assume that you've done a lot of practical anesthesia already. Not everything, because it's impossible even in 5 years, but you've done 80-something% of the normal anesthesia, regional anesthesia, specialized anesthesia. You might have not done pediatric cardiac or something, but it doesn't matter. You can, theoretically talk about, but it's not many pediatric cardiac questions there anyway. It's not a super specialized exam. It's a broad knowledge that is required for this exam, rather than narrow like exam for ESRA, for example, where all they talk about is regional anesthesia. Yeah.
So here I would like to ask one very simple question. If you're an examiner and a student is sitting there and he's answering, so when do you decide he's passed or he's done extraordinary, or when do you think he's not up to the mark? So how do you decide that?
There is in the book, there is and on the website, there is a full explanation of the marking system. Okay. And but part 2 marking system consists of you can score in 4 vivas, in 4 SOEs. You can score maximum of 80 points. Okay, where you will have full marks for every question. So basically, there are 4 vivas with 5 questions in each, which makes 1 viva worth of 20 points. Okay, out of which one examiner gives 10 points, another examiner gives 10 points. If you scored 60 out of 80 points, which is 75%, you will pass. Okay, and also first 2 vivas are clinical sciences. Second 2 vivas are first 2 vivas are basic sciences. Second 2 are clinical sciences. You need to score minimum 25 in each of them to pass. So you cannot overcompensate by being very good at clinical, but not knowing anything in basic sciences. So the way we decide, whether you are worth a mark of 2 or mark of 1 or 0 is where there is a suggested table for the examiners where, for example, if you say, I don't know, or it's a long pauses, long silences, and you say nothing at all, then it will be 0, isn't it? That's easy, right? if you know a lot and you start talking about the topic and you're eloquent and you present and we're stopping you most of the time, say, thank you, that's enough, let's move on. Thank you, that's enough. In the interest of time, usually examiners use this phrase, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to another question.
That
which means
they're doing good.
That means they're doing
student
well.
is doing good.
Exactly.
Oh.
Stopping you is good, which means he's satisfied with what you said.
Okay.
And then the hardest mark is borderline. And the borderline is when, and then we say, how does again, let's go back to pulse oximeter. How does the pulse oximeter work? And you say, okay, I put the probe on the finger. The probe shines lines at two wavelengths and pulsatile, and you say, and what's the basis? What's the physical basis of that principle? And you say, sorry, sir, that I don't quite remember. Okay, so you know the factual knowledge, but you cannot explain. That will be one when you cannot quite explain the reasons behind the principle of pulse oximetry or capnography or whatever other questions that you've been asked. Yeah, that's how we decide. Also, if the questions become harder and harder and harder, you think, oh, he's asking me harder and harder questions, I must not be doing well. It's in fact, it's the opposite. You are doing brilliantly, and this examiner just wants to know whether you are really good, and you may be up for the prize, because there is a prize for both parts. And then an examiner I usually say, once I have a feeling that we're talking as colleagues, not as examiner and a candidate, I know this candidate passed.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you will know that the discussion is going like we're two colleagues discussing a case or discussing the problem or discussing the topic. And that's this feeling is unforgettable, isn't it?
Yeah. So then that person must be the topper in the batch.
Yes, this will be the top person there. One hint I give for the Viva is listen to the question asked. Do not answer something that you know about the topic, but listen to what they've asked. If they say to you, tell me what are the classes of a local anesthetics, you just say there are two classes, esters and amides. So, and stop. Okay, and then he goes, tell me some examples from amide type. You say, okay, it's bupivacaine, it's levobupivacaine, it's ropivacaine. Good. How do they do? And you just stop. Don't volunteer. He asks you the question, you give the direct answer. Otherwise, lots of people say, oh, local anesthetics, their structure is, their mechanism of action is, and they go everything they know about the topic, which is good, but then the examiner will be slightly irritated and will start, okay, stop. I've asked you this. And you think, oh, I'm doing something wrong, isn't it?
Got it. To the point you have to answer.
Yeah, just answer the direct question asked, because the examiner's got a structure in his head of how he wants to approach. Little by little, they go from very simple. The first question is really, really simple, and then go harder. And at some point, most of because it's impossible to know 100% of the knowledge. most of the candidates will reach the point where they will be slightly struggling to answer the question. Yeah. Like, is there any other mechanism of action of local anesthetic? And everyone knows that there is sodium channels blocked from inside and stuff like that. But there is another mechanism, the swelling of the phospholipid membrane, which not many people heard about. It's in my Viva. It's on one of the videos. That alternative mechanism, and that is the extra question. You will not fail for not answering this, but that is the question for being excellent rather than passing. Yeah.
So many tips and tricks you told. So, and next is there are two types of people who answer. One will go to the point, and some will know how to express their answer. And some actually will have the content and subject, but they do not know how to express. So because maybe a problem in talking in English or some other or some state exam fear or something must be there. So how do
Yeah.
you actually differentiate those kind of people and get the stuff out of them?
Let's just discuss, because you've touched upon many aspects of the exam. You've touched
Yeah,
upon the language part of it, and
the language.
I would
First we'll
say
discuss
that,
language part and then we'll go to the second part.
yeah. So the language part is easy to explain. Mind you, majority of the examiners that you will meet, their first language will not be English. Okay, so
Okay.
they're not British. They're certainly not American. Okay, most of them are Europeans. There are maybe a handful of British examiners, and some who are not British but work in Britain, so their English may be better
Okay.
than others. But it's not about the language. So remember, you're in the same boat. They speak not their native tongue. You speak not native tongue. So don't rush. Don't hesitate to ask. If you didn't understand what they say, they will rephrase. Sometimes they will use some colloquial for something, and you didn't know that colloquial word for something. Just ask them to rephrase. They will not be offended. That's fine. And then with language, I've witnessed many times that people with very, very bad command of English still pass, because somehow, if they know their stuff, they will deliver. Whether they will write a lot there, they'll put lots of graphs, or okay, it may not be grammatically correct, or so on, but they will pass because they have the knowledge, and they will be able to demonstrate that knowledge. So the English part, obviously, if you're really bad, then yes, it will come in the way where if you cannot express yourself, that will be really, really difficult. So if you know that the English is your problem, then take some lessons, invest into that. And there are many lessons that can be done online. But I don't think it's a problem for India, because your medical education is in English. So you've been practicing a lot in English. I don't think, in fact, for Indian candidates, it's the other way around. You guys speak very quickly, very, very quickly, and I need to quite often slow down. Yes, that's the problem. Sorry, what was your other question you were
The
asking?
question is, you know the answer, but you're in some kind of a mind block. So as a designer, how do you get that out of the student?
How do you get that out of the candidate? Yes, sometimes candidates, you can see that they take a long pause and they're thinking of how do they start talking about this topic. And if it's a long pause, the examiner will interfere, because the role of the examiner is to give you the chance to answer the question, not to make it harder for you. They will say, okay, it seems like you're struggling to start. Let me help you. Okay, let me rephrase, or let me just say, tell me what do you think has happened, or if it's a clinical or something, how do you start, or what would you normally do in your practice, or something like this. Okay. They will make it slightly simpler and rephrase, and you just have to start talking, and they will direct you through that. Yes, I know the mental block. I had that with one of my colleagues, who is now also an examiner, who was freezing, and the only way of overcoming that is to do lots and lots of practice, which is the best part for that is join another colleague who is preparing, or a group of colleagues, and just vibe each other and be very, in a way, very cruel to each other, ask hard questions, because the examiners actually are not that hard as you think they are. As I said, their job is to pass you. Nobody takes pleasure of failing candidates. We get very upset if the people, come all the way and they perform badly, or they're frightened, or whatever. We're not there. We're not there to torture you or something. The other thing I really wanted to say, that many times some people subscribe to the exam, they come in the morning, they had one go at the first viva, they think they've done badly, and they withdraw. They withdraw on the day and they go home. Whether it's online or in person, they go home. And we always try to persuade them. The poor performance in one viva doesn't mean that you've failed the whole exam. You paid the money, you came. You might as well experience everything, so you have a full picture of what is going to be asked. And if you didn't pass, it doesn't matter. At least you've had your experience, because you paid for that experience. So might as well use whatever you paid for, isn't it? And there are numerous of very, very good, very prominent people who are examiners, anesthetists, presidents, who failed their first attempt to the viva, and I know all of them. I'm one of them. I failed one of my final RCAs. I got it from the second time. I'm not ashamed of this. Is normal. We're all normal people. Only brilliant of us pass everything first time, but they are in the very minority. Most of us are normal.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So let's come to the book that you have written. So basically, can you just briefly tell us, what sections are there in the book, and how should one actually approach reading that book along with other books?
Okay. So as I said, this book has been specifically designed for exam, because exam has been run since 1984, and never in the history of the European exam there was a dedicated book for this exam. So this is why when I came as a member of the committee in 2005, having sat that exam myself, having learned that there isn't a specific resource for this exam, I thought one day I will write a book. And I was trying to put this idea through a few of my superiors at the time, and for one reason or another, it did not happen. But when I became a chairman, I made sure that we approach a good publisher, which is the Oxford University Press, is a very reputable publisher. And there were lots of hoops there, but they eventually, through 3 committees, they have agreed that this book is worthy of writing. And then I obtained Dr. Sue Hill, Dr. Maria Zirapa, who's the Maltese, very prominent anesthetist, and another 12 contributors to the book. And the book is specifically designed for the exam. So there are 4 sections in the book. So the first section is introduction, brief history of exam, and then chapter 3 and chapter 4 speak about tactics. Chapter 3 speaks about tactics of preparing for part 1, and chapter 4 tactics for answering the structured oral examinations, written by the very people who've been involved in setting up the exam, myself, Sue Hill, and Maria Zira. And then there are 4 sections. So section 2 talks about paper A, and paper A is basic sciences. So there is a separate chapter for all the subsections of paper A: physiology, pharmacology, clinical measurements, and physics and statistics. There are separate chapters there with lots of MCQs, all the explanations, not just true false. There is explanation why true is true and why false is false. And for further reading, there are references to other more detailed scientific books. All right. And then section 3 deals with clinical sciences on 6 subsections of clinical sciences: general anesthesia, regional anesthesia, pain, special anesthesia, including neuro, obstetrics, pediatrics, intensive care, emergency medicine, and internal medicine. Remember, there is some internal medicine questions there, not just anesthesia. Lots of people fail to understand that. This is the question. This is the exam of anesthesia and intensive care. So about 25% of the content of the exam is about intensive care. And intensive care cannot be approached without knowing some internal medicine, because after all, it's the extreme of the internal medicine. And then section 4 deals with part 2, with the SOE. And SOEs are written written in the way of as if you're in theater, as if it's a play. So the examiner says this, asks you this question, you answer that. Then the examiner moves on, and then you answer that, and then so on. So it goes as if you're reading a play of Chekhov or whatever. And then again, there are references there at the end. So 23 chapters, 360 something pages, lots of good references. There are some pictures there, graphs and drawings. We were lucky to obtain a very good young artist who done very nice pictures for us, particularly for anatomy sections. Yes, but so it's not just one book that you need for the whole exam. It's in a way it's an MC. It gives you the structure of the exam. As you read the whole book, you will know, okay, this is what I'm preparing for, because it's very interesting, because every time somebody sat part one, they write the feedback. And I, as a chairman, I read this feedback for several years. And there are sentences there like, oh, I didn't know there will be questions on regional anesthesia there, or I didn't know there will be questions on internal medicine there, right? Which means you did not read the syllabus. You didn't know which exams you were preparing for. So this book gives you exactly the clue of what this exam will entail. Okay, and even through going through the content, the table of content, you will know what are the subjects that you need to address. Okay, so we think the book is going to be very, very useful for you. We put a lot of efforts into writing it. 2 years of writing, 1 year of editing, and re-editing before submission, because some things have changed in the interim, but it's finally out, and we are very pleased, and really, really hope that it will help lots of people to pass the exam.
So this book is going to help surely, because I think students should first read this book, then understand how it will be, and then reverse engineer and read those particular chapters elaborately in the particular textbooks.
Yeah. I want to say the easiest, not the easiest, the traditional way, when I was a student many years ago, the traditional way was hitting the big book, reading it cover to cover, and then and then answering the questions, trying to remember what you read several weeks ago, which is hard way, isn't it? It's a hard way. So the reverse engineering, like you're saying, is actually easier. Finding out first which bits you don't know, because there will be bits that you do know and you don't need to read about it a lot. You may need to revise it. And also this book acts nicely as the revision book at just before the exam. Go back to that, read it again, like telegraphically, because you read it once already, and that will help a lot as well. It's not just one book that you need for everything. Like apparently in America, I was told by some of my friends that they all say, "Oh, just read Miller from cover to cover, and then you will know everything." But Miller is about 1,000+ pages.
You cannot retain so much of information from it. It's a reference book, basically, according to me.
It is, isn't it? It's not the exam preparation book.
It's not a preparation book. Yeah. So now, what I am envisioning is now a lot of yearly, I think in India, 1,800 to 2,000 MD anesthesia students pass out. I think in that, many of them are actually planning to go abroad, or even in India, if they have to join some big hospital, this European degree is a very good addition to their MD degree. So many people are going to write in future. And that's what I'm looking into this.
Yeah. I mean, this degree recognized very widely now. It's recognized, I know for sure, in United Arab Emirates on the par with any European qualification. In Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, in Oman, in all these countries, if you want to go there, that will be regarded very highly. In all the European countries, it's partly equivalent to one of their parts, or to a full qualification in their country. in the UK, in particular, the EDAIC works as the confirmation of your primary medical qualification.
Yeah.
Even if your medical school is not recognized by GMC, EDAIC is. So you can get registered with the GMC in the UK on the spot by presenting your passport and EDAIC. And you will have a full registration as a doctor in the UK for this degree. So it's a very powerful degree, and this is what we have achieved in the time since I've been in the committee from 2005 till end of 2020. And so this book is like a cherry on the cake for my involvement with the European exam, and it's dear to me because I sat European exam myself in the 90s. First attempted that in Moscow in 1993, then passed part 1 in Strasbourg, and then part 2 in Uppsala. And then we managed to open it to the world, because remember, it was just for Europeans to start with this exam. And then one of my predecessor, Dr. Zeev Goldik from Israel, decided with our agreement and the agreement of the society to open it to the rest of the world. So we now have candidates from Indian subcontinent, from Middle East, from Africa, even Chinese people sit the OLA online examination. Oh, yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to mention. There is another entity called OLA, Online Assessment. So OLA takes place usually in April every year for the preparation of part 1, which is usually in September. So you can, for very little money, attempt, I think it's 50 or 60.
I checked it, 40 to 50 euros, I think.
40, 50 euros. It's not expensive.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same format like part 1. So you can register for that and sit it at home. You don't need to go anywhere now. It's available as HOLA now, Home Online Assessment. You could be sitting at home, and if you would like to open the book, it's up to you. You're cheating yourself. But yeah, and you will have a very, very good, very quick online instant assessment of the level of your knowledge before sitting part 1 and paying a lot more money for sitting part 1. I'm not sure how much is it now, but it's irrelevant. So OLA, I strongly recommend to sit there. And that is another thing that Dr. Suhail and I started in 2011, and it's now very, very popular. Lots of people sit it.
Got it. So, superb interview, Dr. Varvinskiy. So many insights you have spoke about the EDAIC, the importance of writing the exam, and also we discussed how to pass the exam. So any conclusion, final points you want to tell the audience of my channel and Indian students?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Erash, for having me here. It's a wonderful opportunity to speak to Indian doctors. We're all in demand in the world, anesthesiologists. I wish all the success for preparing for part 1. As you rightly mentioned, it's not just for the exam for you to travel abroad, to work abroad, which is also good, but it also will stand you out among your peers in your country. And this is the reason why lots and lots of doctors in European countries where there is no requirement for the national exam to take it. For example, I know for a fact that every chief anesthesiologist of every department in Germany is the diplomat of the European Society. They took all that exam, and this is how they say, I am better, I am cleverer, I am worthy of a higher position, I am worthy of a higher payment, okay, because I took so much effort and I passed this exam. This is why, I stand out of the crowd. So people take the exam for many reasons, for career progression. Maybe they've immigrated, maybe they married something, maybe they just want to work for a few years in a different country, gain experience, come back to their own country.
Yeah.
Whichever suits your needs, basically. That exam can help you. Okay.
Yes.
It's not obviously not a ticket. It doesn't necessarily means that you have a visa or something, but it will help you enormously to progress and just become a better anesthetist as well, isn't it? It's better for our patient, and it's it's been running for very long time, and the attempt is to unify the knowledge, and this exam kind of gives anyone in any country an idea that if you present this exam, they say, okay, this doctor from India actually demonstrated that he understands and the principles of anesthesia that we practice in Europe, and it's a high standard. And yes, I'm happy to give him a job or give him a try to work there or whatever. Yeah. So, but good luck. Lots of resources and time that you need to invest into that. But be positive. And if you didn't pass first time, it's not the end of the world. You're not stupid or anything. You're normal. Bite the bullet and come back again. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Varvinskiy. And one more final thing I would like to tell, and many first year and second year anesthesia students are there in my channel. So if I am in a first year or anesthesia or something like that, I would actually read your book, and it will actually help me in passing my MD exam also. Even in my MD exam, there will be a viva. So by reading the book, we actually understand how the examiner thinks, and so it will help both passing my exam, and also it will be a kind of preparation for European diploma. So both purposes will be served.
No, fantastic. As always, isn't it? Like I mentioned before, the FRCA books were used for preparing for the European exam. Now, this book, the trainees in my department, I already recommended it to them, and they looked at it and they said, "Oh, yes. That will be helpful for me to prepare for the FRCA," because the knowledge is the same, isn't it? It's just the structure is slightly different. But if you know the stuff, then basically you can pass any exam you like in any country, as long as you have knowledge. But it helps if you concentrate if you know the rules of this particular game, of this particular exam, and you follow the rules just for this particular examination. This is the whole purpose of this book, was to give you a structured approach to sit this particular examination, and at the same time learn lots of knowledge, become a better doctor, better anesthetist.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Varvinskiy. So we'll wrap up the session now. So that's it, guys. This is the end of the video. As usual, Dr. Dheeraj Masapu logging off. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Go ahead. Cheers.